A little young legion, steady, lack of tribes, and hear your name. The republic for which we stand, America, it was revealed by the entire species of volume led by the same identity of value/value progression that better than just engineered how we are individual as distinct, not distinct and simultaneous identity of volume are the ways we are grouped simultaneously as value/value progression. Excuse me. Simultaneously as the species body of volume, distinctly, non-distinctly, and simultaneously. This is part of the Trinity, but the Trinity is inseparable from all parts, wherein how they are value/value progression, wherein how there is one identity of volume that is an only increasing identity of volume, and where volume equals value as nature/nature as value. And that is exactly how it has to be spoken. Because this is to antagonize all parts. Control your hearts. It does. The rest proceeds. So we have means to agree that are natural, native, pure, no matter what country we're in. The human organism is in a semi-ancient trap that came from before modern nations, that had victims reacting as locations, areas, and states of the phenomenon of modern nations, already incapable of defending themselves and fact-cheaping nature-wise, where and how we are value as, where and how we are quality, where and how it counts more than, all exception nature used to demonstrate other. It's because we never let examine what is actually recorded about that predicate act delivery system method, that forced roles with people behind the whip, with the torture on top of slavery, with the uses of it on top of that, with not just the orchestration of it. It is an engineering, it is a re-engineering of ancient revelations, wherein how the entire species was being led by what really causes positive identity of value progressions, acts in natures, rather than negative value nature progressions, acts in natures, that were incentivized and employed on off the record and unfathomed to all locations, areas, and states. It maintained propagated roles so it could perpetually an archetypal breaching method, an archetypal predicate acts delivery system method, if you will. I am not a lawyer. They're also recorded originally still a part of what correlation in science needs to demonstrate too, was a part of that multi-front. Roles with that. And then that's sustained. Because in that was being exploited what was being sustained. Not just off the record and unfathomed. But that too was engineered. Parallel to and in conjunction with and as. Parts off the record with all the known. Negative value nature progressions, acts and natures. Acts like predicate acts. Natures like criminal and citizens' natures, wrongdoing. But this is where we come to, and where and how we come to, where and how hundreds of nations, as intelligence communities, for example, per themselves, they kept saying, per President Obama, one of the best things a president ever declassified. Or not, it was already maybe declassified, but made notice. But how many countries are already entrenched here? So we have agreements here and there, because we have people here, shared here and there with schools, the kids. The human body's identity of volume is increasingly not in the native system that revealed the republic for which we stand as the identity course, that is individual, grouped, and all together. There is one way we can control the species' identity of volume. Volume's relationship to the one identity of simultaneous nature that is also increasing those volumes by the way it is two identities of sequence/simultaneous nature, one before and one beyond another way. That is value here now. For example, just as progressive value is. Again, where and how we are a value/value progression. And that is value nature. So this is how English was revealed to be taught. Increasingly, simultaneously valuing the languages remembered by the countries, the phenomenon of what were the countries, what we would call that countries now, at the time, the groups. In other words, a breaching method, the devil, the proverbial devil, an archetypal criminal enterprise, if you will. It engineered what would cause to be manifest overt criminal enterprises and roles with them self-value, private criminal enterprises and roles with them self-value, branches of government criminally legalized, and they should be laws to decriminalize pot, for example, rather than legalize. In other words, that implies that language is also involved with sequence shifts, because that's one of the things they made and make and keep each age of fact-keeping nature needing to self-value roles with, where and how they have to respond as correlation nature to all the ways it is communicated, where passions and emotions are telling them to ignore correlation/discorrelation and to replace it with other narratives. True, because they never found means to describe their relationships with themselves demonstrably that forbid that and must punish themselves with sanctions because of their relationships, because otherwise markets would be able to be manipulated. You know, there are hundreds of nations at once, so they increasingly need to value stability and with their syntax, and so relevant to function. And see, computers are mimicking this, but they want us to follow them now. You see me too. In other words, America is about a breaching method that was preventing its free speech, and is still preventing its free speech, and it was screening that. It was so many things that were multi-front, that were connected. If you don't deal with that, then you start fighting for voting rights. And you start defending that in premises treatments that are incapable of defending themselves and affording a quality of fact-keeping nature to demonstrate that Jim Crow laws were about arrays of opinions in relationship to a predicate acts delivery system method that was left entrenched because our founders had to hide roles with what really left to the American Revolution. They had to hide roles by entertaining um, sick roles with sick things in natures of theater they did not want entertained. Not one has trained. That means the Constitution has to be unabridged. See, sequence shifts are also relevant to that. And time treatments. Using time always too fast, too slow. To let people demonstrate all the different ways, the opinions and the convictions, formal and informal. We have overt criminal enterprises. Have the three branches of government individually grouped and together as self-valued criminal and citizen's natures. Worse than criminally legalized, worse than war crimes. As a method that is complete possession over every identity grounds, quality of fact human nature. Relevant to and as simultaneously positive and negative treatments, as identity is. Again, identity is also a semi-nature relationship to that which revealed us in everything, individually, grouped, and together. Because it can only be to make more of itself. It can only make more of the integrity of itself as the concentrated value of Earth, where and how it will only be increasingly positive onto all parts of space/existence at once. The identity of simultaneous nature. We're not supposed to agree about the name of, and simultaneously we are. But relative to the science, see, we don't have mandated law followed. There are all kinds of natures of evil and of insidious natures of positive treatment that are only let be fathomed by this method that was sophistication here, consciously to the possession of what, in other words, it knew that nature was going to cause negative value nature progressions, acts, and natures, and demonstration of humanity no longer using the identity of relativity as the identity of simultaneous nature, that inventions work or not in relationship to it. They are further positive or not in relationship to it. And so a criminal insidiousness nature, someone who makes an opinion justifying, even if they do it wrong when they're against things that everyone's against. In other words, when people are dishonestly pretending they're against something, though, in a way that's only to cause and to keep a quality of fact human nature, and it blamed on other things, others themselves, exactly the way the breaching method wanted us to and needed us to. So we're still speaking black and white, because no one will permit first a quality of fact human nature that tells American history using correlation/discorrelation, using the value of sequence true before the order of the finite, which begins within as the lead up to, as the Declaration of Independence, and or as the plan and means to a temporary counter criminal insidiousness nature, counter capable of entering the facade of modern nations as the value of the ancient republic, and or as the exceptions that go with it, because for example, of how there are distinct identities of invisible but discernible, and the one they are together is distinct from that. And so when we use this science, see, but we have to be able to use correlation slash discorrelation as evidence. And only people have heard words like evidence, facts, truth, positive, research, relative to theory treatments, for example, that are measured and maintained countries A1 through Z, however many countries there are, in our territories, measured and maintained, self-value, blamed on, the quality of, I forgot what we're speaking about. The point is, if we go by the invention, the identity that inventions work or not in relationship to it, they are further positive or not in relationship to it, it is what reveals evolution's fruits and gifts, means from nowhere. And this deals with ground, the ways we know, but also, in other words, also ways that no one could fathom an identity of roles with. Because, for example, on top of torture, which is on top of slavery, additional to slavery, identity theft slash frauds. And additional to that is uses of it, for example, remotely, where and how right through private schools, not by accident, right through public schools, both, I meant to say public first, they blame other things, others themselves. In other words, they're self-valuing words that are and treatments of positive and negative, and uses of nature, for example, where nature is valued and value but of our founding parents, uses of the theft of and slash fraud of their identities. Because it is recorded that now if they tried to have free speech and equality of fact, human nature, and defenses of the Constitution unabridged, there were already roles with what was entrenched already in having been being sustained so long, relative to this natural science, where we're supposed to use and understand words slash values like value, nature, positive, negative, truth, but not like punks and out of sequence, and or not like insidious, criminal insidiousness natures, mass wrongdoers, mass wrongdoing roles, and or self-value when responding to things, because everyone's naive. That is consciously communicated, consciously taught, and other is pretended consciously, and everyone's speaking through others. Forgiveness is for people who are trying to tell about roles with the predicate acts delivery system method, whether the people realize or not. The extent that people do realize is through where and how they need to hide sequence shifts, having been self-valued, finite, active, and progressive lies, and identity thefts, frauds, type illusions and lies, roles. Like, for example, relative to police showing up at people's houses at various ages because they were called, or arrests and then courts. And the whole time, there are identities of relativity between that and the campuses that are having been exploited. And it's always next to places, too. Because of even next to body dumping spots that are also, those are things relative, too. See, little kids bring up serious things when they bring up overt criminal enterprises and private ones. And the branches of government in collusion with them, which is what is brought up when Jim Crow laws are brought up. And which is brought up when people deny it. They have to use self-valued, criminally foreign influence premises treatments, sequence treatments, finite, active, progressive treatments, and identity treatments. Again, this is where our identities, individually grouped and together, they have an identity of relativity to that identity of simultaneous nature that we are revealed as, again, in demonstration to us as the perfect science, native pure. So, vaccines, I teach you things, but long. Play species coach. We move as one. Vaccine. Since before our founders' births, since before cars, there were laws and were torture methods and murder methods that were formally threatening everybody. Not to speak about any other nature of infrastructure, not to fathom it, speaking about it unless they were going to be in tight measured database identity of relativity. Points of communication is the same way they do it now. The suits and ties nations, the counters to them, individually grouped and together, nations A1 through Z1. They don't have integrity, but they pretend other. They simultaneously need to increasingly self-value criminal uses of criminally foreign influence, qualities of sequence treatments, qualities of premises treatment, all that. Quality of fact treatment nature, time treatments. So we have courts originally, then they need to compare, oh, this is the best. Wherever you are is the best. Now, there are the impositions that are unnatural in the sense where the predicate acts delivery system method that came from semi-ancient times, it was and is the complete possession of all identities of sophistication and of all identities of counter to that as prevented sophistication, but simultaneously nature makes our identity evolve and be able to see. That's pseudoscience. So we blame, the campus. The campus is not the fault. And it's not the names as like who's good or bad. This is a criminal, that's not. They've been sequence shifting. The courts and the police forms and time treatments relative to. This is a method that is from off campuses of each age and nature, including homeschool, then on off those places, including homeschool. Roles that with all that was is actually to. All that no one fathomed. Because everybody was playing the game of roles with value systems that are slavery against everyone employed, sickly distinctly. They use words. They use phrases. In other words, they use words like debate, They use words like logic. They use premises. They use it commonly. They make, what's their premise? Like there's one. Every subject has part of its identity as what, relative to what is simultaneous. And so those simple words, for example, those simple scientific observations, how they identify the ground, the infrastructure, the roads, the widths of them, since before cars, the suburban infrastructure, the pathology of the city set up ahead of time, just like the suburbs, but then to be converted 2-family houses, 3-family houses. Designed by the breaching method to cause negative value, because nature would cause negative value nature progressions, acts in natures in demonstration. See, the ancients knew that the campuses system of the ancient republic, they are concentrated locations, concentrated values that are simultaneously observable at other locations, because everybody is, and especially them, being led by, especially differentially, being led by the simultaneous nature. And so to teach about a language is right, to teach about English, to teach about the English alphabet correctly, properly, not just correctly, properly, to teach about it perfectly. It is about, to teach about the grammar. It is about this identity of volume science. And science has to come before theory. So there's a nature of theater and of positive and negative treatments, where each young kid, this is a method of, one method of child abuses across the array of distinct identities of sophistication that there are, of different campuses, of different books for the campuses, of different orders of thought, timing towards locations that it's not, and people don't even realize. There's chaos that is originally and still being and having been exploited. Again, off the records. See, that is used to maintain. Everything is used to maintain collusion with all identity ground locations, how they're being used by the original sophistication method that also consciously knew the same way in a positive value nature progression, valuing the campuses of the republic, the systems, concentrated positions properly. And when everyone's doing it in their positions properly, we know that, but we could discern it from where we are, because we don't leave out the ground or gather round. So then they made different natures of industries to cause positive value nature progressions, acts, natures, as means. But those are temporary. This is the identity of forever nature that's making more of its volume and of its identity of relationship to itself, which is why and how it is demonstrating and wants us to know the difference between, not just between positive and negative, but between treatments of positive that are criminal insidiousness, natures of positive treatment, and treatments of negative that are criminal we obviously. But everyone missed the part where the positive treatments and the truths and the quote facts unquote treatments originally started being and having been employed. Delusions wrought too, but also rules, crimes, predators. Again, as time treatment predators using time too fast, too slow simultaneously to get over on forever nature. So schools A through Z need to teach when a kid says, or when a teacher says, before any more teachers say, George Washington owned slaves. In other words, it's like saying the proverbial title that Harry Beecher Stowe labeled Uncle Tom owned slaves. The roles with that countries A through Z were already entrenched here. China and Russia were already entrenched here. And they are white. It's nothing against China and Russia because they are also victims, their own people, of this internations established. For example, they have their uses of psychology and of psychiatry and of their drugs. They've been fabricating audio and video increasingly because there are rules about how before they could do things that, think about what they're doing in the first place. We're over here hearing about Britney Spears on Fox News and on CNN and MSNBC being forced to drugs in her, being forced to talk about, use her family's names, being forced to speak about things she needs to speak about, and as a quality of fact treatment nature that's using time too fast and simultaneously too slow to force her and everyone, even if they made that up, because the news made up things tied to medicine, because they have roles with police forms who are also doctors, foreign and domestic. They have collusion. They have illusion collusion. They have delusion collusion. And the only reason they've gotten away with it since founding, pounding drums, is because of how they are rules, crimes, predators too. How they are backed into it the same way the overt criminal enterprises are backed into it, because they are also recorded criminal enterprises, plural and private. They are recorded how kept needing to hide the same finite, active, and progressive lies and sequence shifts and identity and natures of identity thefts and frauds, methods, roles, and methods to cover that up. Manifest originally and still. Boxing's the other kill. So that human body, that third volume, this is about the invisible but still discernible. The ancients revealed this. Write it all out and stuff like that. So I'll do it, but then it's like it's part because it control your heart, because the science of sharing identity. English was revealed to teach this. Every letter spells out a word, and every word simultaneously spells out a sentence. In demonstration of it, for example. I believe there's videos on that. A stands for alpha, not just for alpha. So you note that as the root of the word alphabet, alpha. Remember that Jesus Christ. I don't know if I learned this through the nature of Catholicism or care for Jesus Christ's defense of the ancient republic, which is not just. See, people say, "Oh, but it's Roman." Is that they make a quality of fact cheaping nature about the past, because that's increasingly relevant here in subjects A through Z. Increasingly relevant is how and why the subjects share an identity. Doxing. It reaches to that. Like, no, whatever. There are proofs that it is more practical and more probable that boxing, martial arts, and that wrestling were revealed by humanity working together in ancient times, after they had discovered the causes of and the existence of criminal locations, areas, and states being and having been criminally foreign influenced, and nature demonstrating that. But it was totally other than it was now. In other words, the breaching method, the archetypal criminal enterprise, the devil method, made everyone blame on other things, others themselves, the real causes of negative value nature, progressions, acts, natures. It knowing that everyone would defend that. It knowing that everyone defending would defend and value premises treatments, sequence treatments, finite, active, and progressive treatments, nature treatments, where nature is value, so its value is nature. So everyone increasingly having to blame what nature's demonstrating as the law. That's the law. Individuals, groups, areas, ages, sexes, alpha and omega, yin yang. Yin yang will never part. Control your heart will only increase as volume. That is positive and also positive unto itself. It is harder to discern, and it is variable or constant with alpha and omega. This is where and how we are a quality of diffusion. This is where and how we are a semi-nature. When we're talking about how we are a complete nature. When we are positive onto all parts of ourselves at once, it is simultaneously positive onto itself. The semi-nature, we are a semi-nature relationship to it. One identity of forever nature. That one identity of forever nature's identity of relationship to itself. Positive and negative. That's why I make the distinction between not just its identity of volume, but its identity of relationship to itself. And the value of that. Not just because it's positive and negative. Because of the identities of sequence/simultaneous nature. See, the Trinity. It's the original inherent active and progressive identity of value/value progression that came from before the beginning of the Bible. This part, the beginning of the Old Testament, says that we're supposed to write. We're also supposed to, the sciences are supposed to come together and use as evidence how even the stewards of the identity, the ground locations of the religions have been and are using criminally foreign influence premises treatments, sequence treatments, finite, active, progressive, and identity treatments, self-value increasingly, and how that was and is exploited. And forget words like ego. You guys are with delusions and as rules predators, and with your opinions and your convictions, and as rules originally instilled against yourselves, with allowing not to be told on all the tricks and ways they stack fabricated audio and video into databases, pretending passions and emotions, inclusion time too, overt criminal enterprises, private ones, and the interbranch families, each age of fact-cheaping nature of each one of those ones, using the same locations, like public schools, like private schools. Fools are only made when it's not played. It only feels like game because /s because it is everywhere at once. What evolution is sourced by and as. It is positive onto and as the value treatments of sequence before the order of the finite now. It is positive, while as that, we don't leave out the slightest detail, not being led by the evolution science, and it uses ground distinctly from how it uses ourself and every other form of life, itself being semi-life. And then complete too, by its roles with plants. Everything is in demonstration. English is revealed not just to teach English, to teach about how the sciences share an identity of volume that has an identity of relationship to itself and has the value of that as 1/3/5 distinct identities of sequence nature / simultaneous nature. How it is 3 identities that are bound and could still be the integrity of being one value, the way it is why it is related to how it is 5 at the same time, distinctly. For example, the inherent, the active, and the progressive are bound. For example, the cell nucleus, the cell body, and the cell wall. I'm not a doctor, we don't have to be doctors. We could discern them bound. All gather around. We look through the microscope, we see the dot in the center. Not so clear, like on a picture you could draw it. But you could discern there's a nucleus manifest. There's a cell body manifest. And the cell wall manifest. And that's what we call the identity as the cell. It also has 2 identities of sequence / simultaneous. It has the cell walls and the other cells. They connect, and then they're even thicker where they're touching. Like more than one is touching the nearest spot, it gets thicker. For example, looking through the microscope at tomato cells. Life wants us to understand and use the words we're using. It was revealed, English, by a perfect system. Systems after, as victims, but as victims who defended best they could, abridged qualities of what the ancients revealed. They could no longer afford to defend themselves and to have anyone else reveal what was already capable of being revealed, which is how English must be taught. Boxing is fought. See, with rules. And then boxing. Violence in the hands of criminal insidiousness nature. Especially violence in the hands of criminal insidiousness nature and criminal insidiousness natures of positive treatments in theaters. For example, as a criminal, a wrongdoer, a nature of theater, affected by and as criminal foreign influences. So we have a little minority from each country. Like, for example, with psychiatry and with drugs. They have their roles, forcing drugs on patients and criminals, especially when they do this against innocent people, and especially per their roles with their patients and criminals and murderers included. But since before, and child abusers, since before they were caught, the same people and systems and locations that put them away and that watch over them and that force drugs into them, those doctors, they were involved with Facebook crimes with them on and off a principal child offenders campus. All the uses of the family members, the neighbors of everybody, because of this method. It forces people to use other names or to ignore a whole bunch of stuff. And that is being and having been exploited by what no one fathomed, and is directly relevant to how everything's so stupid, everyone's so stupid. For example, relevant to the relevance of where and how it is so overtly / insidiously, that and how our standards and means and treatments of what appears to be blocking our means, to describe how, since before cars, where this was set to make identity of negative value nature, progressions, actions, natures, uses of space that are cheap. And so they make the exception, maybe making it expensive. That's not law speaking. That's law speaking through, measured and maintained with criminally foreign influence premises treatments, sequence treatments, finite, active, progressive treatments, identity treatments, quality of fact treatment, nature treatments, time treatments, locations, uses, and treatments. Same way the gangs have their logic. They show us the same newses that are lying, stealing us the fake words with them, timed. Overt criminal enterprises, private ones, and the branch of government individually grouped together. They even have methods of hiding their criminal foreign influences individually, each one, like switching names. They also grouped do that distinctly too, consciously, on a mass scale. Naive reactions to the real causes of negative value nature, progressions, actions, natures, and too late. Oh, but I didn't become a police officer, or I didn't become a judge till I was a soul. Follow mandated law. Follow what is simultaneous. Follow the value of sequence true. And then the money. I mean, it's more, forget the money. The money and who's going to follow the money, those are all employed, a raise. When they say that phrase, I don't know where I saw it. What do I have to say? CBS, NBC, ABC, one of those networks must have covered it. HBO, Showtime. I usually just watch news. So, but I have entertainment. I little rap kind of friends. I have to get I have to get my dog going. Vaccines until snowing. Snow that falls. So all we have to do is agree to things like that. From nations A to Z. We have means to give the element. If we agree to this, so now what we do, we simultaneously, we know that the people stacking in New York City, we know that simultaneously it's hundreds of nations that have people stacking at once. So we know that we have hundreds of nations that share policing here at once. And where that is not known, people are making opinions and convictions anyway. There are a whole bunch of things mixed with the when little kids and when adults go out and protest and walk, march. It's used to measure and maintain where and how we don't have the right to assembly, but others pretended for through motivations, nature's needs, interests, already being and having been engineered, perfected for them, abridged, constitution roles per the defenses of their premises treatments, sequence treatments, identity treatments. Black agencies and courts, demonstrably too, there are a bunch of proofs, had roles with slavery. Although all those countries were already entrenched here themselves, they made and kept such to keep the others from coming. I mean, to keep their own leverage. Everyone became the puppets. Countries A through Z. The same database method that could control people, force them to roles with slavery from overseas. All these countries here, no one's allowed to talk about any of their foreign loans, and that effectively worked. I forgot I was going to do the point. It could do a lot more. And we could do a lot more. Because the only reason it has such might and control over all the power and all the finite, active, progressive fact treatments and potentials and names is because it maintained possession of the sciences, maintained possession of the functions that can't be invented or re-engineered or changed. It is the same course. It is only its identity of relationship to the elements and ground, again distinctly, non-distinctly, and simultaneously from ourselves, to distinctly, non-distinctly, and simultaneously as itself, and so this discernible. Better than learnable. Oh, you lies. All right? Okay, thank you.